Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the dark oak.
Today, we'll talk all about the Boca Raton Mall murders.
Welcome to The Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month, through our charity, the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of earnings from our Patreon and sponsors to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. This month, we are sponsoring the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance. To find out more, stay to the end of this episode. Visit our Instagram page, The Dark Oak Podcast, or our website, thedarkoak.com. Well, Cynthia, early morning, dark oak coming at you.
That's right. Early morning. Like, I haven't even had a full cup of coffee yet, Stephanie. And yet I've lived an entire day already. Not a good one.
Tell me about your morning, Cynthia. What happened?
So I don't know if you know this about me, but you know how some people are afraid of spiders or cockroaches, snakes? I am terrified of lizards.
No, I did not know that. And I bet that makes your experience of living in Florida that much more fulfilling because they're everywhere.
Folks, if you've never been to Florida, you can't walk 3 steps outside without a lizard running past. They're everywhere. So I've always thought, man, I live in the wrong state because I'm truly terrified of them, like terrified.
And they dart. They're like dart in front of you.
Oh,
it's so
they'll
funny.
Jump on you. They're awful. My sister used to taunt me back when she was too young to even say the word lizard. So she would say, Cynthia, I got a lizard. And she would literally chase me with lizards. I'm truly terrified of them. A cockroach, a spider won't bother me. I'm less bothered by a snake. I'm really not truly that bothered by snakes. But lizards, man, lizards freak me out. So sadly, we have a catio. So my cats are all indoor cats, but they have access to this enclosed catio where they can actually go outside, play in the grass. And since installing this catio, we get these little creatures brought into our house. So this morning, before I've even had my coffee, I've already dealt with 2 lizards being brought into my house, and it's just been terrible.
Wait, okay. Dead lizards?
So the first one, it was just the top half of a lizard laying on its back.
Gross.
But this lizard was grosser because it was literally lifting its head. I don't even know how. I've never seen that happen before.
It's like a possessed lizard.
It's like the top half of a lizard. And it's lifting its head. And seriously, I had to be like, Cynthia, you watched your mom die of cancer. You can handle this. You're a strong person. You watched your mom die of cancer. You can get this lizard out.
Because you're home alone, right?
I'm home alone. So somebody's got to get the lizard out. I'm not going all day with a lizard in my house.
Can't you just leave it? I mean,
no, it's in the middle of my kitchen. No, I'm not.
I don't know. Just let it pass in peace.
It was dead. It was dead.
It was dead and wriggling.
It was awful. It was awful. And then the other one was this stunned and injured baby lizard.
Oh, no.
So I'm not going to leave that and let my cats eat it. I hate them, but I'm also not a monster. It was still intact, but it was just really stunned. And then, of course, me trying to sweep it up with a broom probably didn't help. But
oh, Cynthia.
What else am I going to do, Stephanie? I got it out. It would not have lived in my house. It has a chance now outside. So,
Possibly.
No, trust me. I know enough about lizards to know they get stunned. A week ago, I went to sweep one up that appeared to be dead. It was just faking. It was faking. It got as soon as I touched it with the broom, it jumped up and ran away.
That was a special treat just for you.
Especially because I'm like, I know that you are going to emerge out from underneath this refrigerator. And when you do, I'm going to find your half-eaten body. Hopefully I don't step on it
Mm.
as I'm doing dish. Oh my gosh. Oh, I hate
Oh,
it.
my favorite is when you just see the tail with nothing attached to it, just wriggling around. I'm
Oh.
sure you've seen that multiple times because the lizards here, for anybody who's not like familiar with lizards, they drop their tails. They can separate their tails, and the tail has enough stimulation in it, I guess electro signals in it, that it will keep wriggling to distract a predator, and then the lizard can run away, and the lizard regrows a tail.
Yeah.
So every now and then I'll find just the tail just wriggling
Ugh.
around. Or out in my yard, because again, I have chickens, and so they'll go after a lizard for sure. And every now and then I'll see a lizard run by that has no tail.
Yeah.
So I said, "You're a survivor. You're a survivor, little lizard. I did not know you had this aversion to lizards, and now I know." I just thought that was something you acclimated to, considering they're just everywhere here.
No.
And they don't bite, like they don't do anything.
It's completely irrational. They do nothing. They don't hurt you. They're actually almost cute, some of them. Now, most of our lizards are really scaly and gross and ugly looking, but there are some that are cute.
On
No,
behalf of lizards everywhere, I disagree.
that they're
They're
cute.
all adorable. No, they're
Oh
all
no.
adorable.
Oh no. The scaly, big, yucky. Oh no. No, no, no. And I've actually gotten a lot better because old me, Cynthia in her 20s, would have left the house and not come back.
Just burn
Here's-
it down. Just burn
I
it
would
down.
have not come back until there was another person there to get the lizard out. But 40 something Cynthia will get a broom and a dustpan and sweep it.
And hope it doesn't retaliate and crawl
And
up your leg.
literally, and just remind myself, it's okay. You're a strong person. Strong person. You can do this. You've got this. You've done harder things.
And guys,
So-
these are the stories you get when we haven't quite had our coffee. So
Yeah.
you're welcome. Oh, fun. Florida summer fun.
Speaking of Florida, today's story happened in Boca Raton, which is South Florida. And our listeners may not know, I used to live about 20, 30 minutes away from Boca.
By the way, I also refer to these as the dark days because these were the years that you and I were not in communication.
Yep.
We've known each other since first grade, and then we both moved away. But then we came back and it was sunny again. So these are the dark days.
The dark days. Barely worth living, if you ask me. On that note, Stephanie, as I mentioned, I used to live in South Florida, and I actually moved down there early 2008, and I lived there from 2008 to 2011. And the cases I'm going to tell you about today all happened in 2007, and I had never heard of these cases. Have you heard of the Boca Raton mall murders?
No, when you mentioned it, I hadn't at all. And you would think with a name like Mall Murders, it would be something I would have heard of before, but no.
Me neither. I frequented this mall. You know, it's one of those really nice malls with the Cartier and the Louis Vuitton and the Gucci. So it's like,
okay.
I mean, it's Boca. So anybody who's not aware, Boca Raton is a very high-end neighborhood, very high-end town, city.
But this is like one of these luxury malls in addition.
Pretty much everything in Boca is luxury. But yes, this mall is top tier, high-end luxury malls. So,
Okay.
of course, as a 20-something single mom, you know, that's where I liked to go.
Miss Mama Warbucks over there,
Yeah.
huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I would just look at the windows and stare longingly.
Drool puddling on the floor.
So let me tell you about these cases. Detective Bill Springer of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office has seen his share of heartbreaking cases. But few have stuck with him like the string of murders that occurred in South Florida 18 years ago. On March 23, 2007, 52-year-old Randy Gorenberg, a beautiful wife and mother of 2 children, Daniel and Sari, woke up and watched the Today Show at her beautiful $2 million home in Boca Raton.
May have been quite the different experience that you and I had this morning.
I bet she wasn't getting lizards out of her house before coffee.
Sweeping up disemboweled lizards from her kitchen floor.
Well, it actually was. That morning, John Legend performed on the Today Show, and Randy was watching it. And she liked his music so much, she decided to go to the mall and purchase his new CD. So she left her home and she headed to the town center at Boca Raton. Again, this is a very high-end mall located in Boca Raton, Florida. Randy bought the CD at the FYE store. Do you remember those? It's like a music store in the mall.
Yep.
And while she was at the mall, she did some shopping at Old Navy. She was seen on surveillance video leaving the mall at around 1:15 in the afternoon. Now, sadly, this surveillance was going to be the last time anyone saw Randy alive. No one knows exactly what happened next because there were no surveillance cameras in the mall parking lot in 2007, which is hard to imagine, but that was 18 years ago. So much more the norm than I think I even realized.
And these big malls, they have pretty expansive parking lots, if
Huge.
I'm recalling. So it would be very difficult to get footage of the parking lot and footage that was clear enough and precise enough to capture anything actually happening out there.
To give you an idea of how large, first of all, the mall is, but also the parking lot. Not only is there a parking lot, there's also a parking garage. So it is very, very large. Detective Springer believes that Randy was abducted in the mall parking lot and either driven or forced to drive to an ATM in her own vehicle. However, this attempt at a robbery would have been a lost cause because Randy did not carry a debit card. Now, Detective Stringer believes this could have been really upsetting for whoever had abducted her, if they even believed her when she said she didn't have any access to her account. Because again, Boca's a high-end area. Randy drove a Mercedes SUV. She dressed in nice clothes. She carried an expensive bag. So she looked like someone who would definitely have access to cash. Therefore, her not having a debit card was probably a big surprise to her abductor.
So she had credit cards, I'm assuming?
None of the source material I looked at said exactly what she did carry. I'm assuming credit cards. I think even back in 2007, we were still using checks, right? So there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So she had methods of payment. They just weren't ways that would have given her quick access to large amounts of cash.
Correct. About 45 minutes after Randy was seen leaving the mall, a 911 call was made from a park about 5 miles away. This caller said that they heard gunshots coming from a black Mercedes-Benz SUV, and they reported seeing a woman being pushed out of the vehicle, and they believed this woman was dead. Tragically, Randy's body would be found at that location, Governor Lawton Childs Memorial Park, only 5 minutes away from her home.
Oh, man.
Later that evening, authorities were able to locate surveillance video that showed Randy's SUV pulling into a hardware store about 2 miles from the park, but it was impossible to see who was behind the wheel. When the SUV was recovered, Randy's purse, cell phone, and a pair of white Puma-style tennis shoes were missing. And what I don't know is I don't know if those were shoes she had just purchased, if they were the shoes she was wearing, or maybe she just had a pair of shoes in her car.
Okay, I could see that. But either way, gosh.
That evening, Randy's mother, Heidi Elias, saw on the news that deputies had found a woman's body in a local park. And this hit her especially hard because that very day she'd been comforting a friend whose daughter had just died after an illness. Soon after seeing the news report, Heidi got the call that it was her own daughter who had been found in the park. And later she reflected on the irony that she was suddenly in the same shoes of the woman she'd just been trying to comfort hours earlier.
Oh, gosh. That's so hard.
Heidi told WPTV reporter Ashley Glass, quote, "That day was the worst day of my life," end quote. And she went on to say, "It's very hard to lose a child. I think it's the hardest thing in the world." Now, in those moments after Heidi learned that her daughter had been killed, authorities were taking a look at those close to Randy. The same night she was killed, authorities saw Randy's 25-year-old son, Daniel, driving his car at a high rate of speed into the family's garage. He was then seen opening the trunk, pulling out a spray bottle and a roll of paper towels, and pacing in the driveway while on his cell phone while smoking. And this was before he was made aware of his mother's death. So the behavior seemed a little suspicious to authorities.
And I'm assuming he lived at the family home?
I didn't see anything in the source material saying that he lived there or didn't live there. I assume he lived there because that is the location that this happened. So to me, it makes sense. If he's pulling the car into the garage, then he lives there.
Okay.
When detectives spoke with Daniel and told him about his mom's murder, they asked him about his whereabouts at the time of her murder, and Daniel said that he'd been at work. But when police tried verifying it with his employer, they were told that Daniel had not been working at the time. Detectives asked Daniel to turn in the clothing he'd been wearing that day so they could examine them, but he gave them the wrong set of clothes. It's pretty strange, right?
Well, right from the get-go, I don't know that this guy, if he has indeed done something wrong, heck, even if he hasn't done anything wrong, why is he lying about verifiable details? Like, clearly, if you're at work, they're going to ask your boss if you're at work.
And to answer you, I don't know. I would say if he was responsible for Randy's death, he doesn't want to be honest about where he was.
At least come up with something they would believe, like, oh, I was out fishing or I was out doing something alone.
Sure. At the same time, let's say he was lying about his whereabouts. I don't think that necessarily means he's responsible for his mom's murder. Definitely suspicious. I would want to know more. He could have just been doing something else bad.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe he was doing something else he didn't want the police to know about. But either way, I get the feeling this guy might be up to no good.
I have a hard time finding any good reason why you would lie about your whereabouts and be hesitant to turn in your clothing if you were on the straight and narrow.
Yep.
But Daniel wasn't the only suspicious person in the family. Randy's husband, Stuart, a very successful chiropractor, was also acting strangely. A captain from the Palm Beach County Homicide noticed that both Stuart and Daniel had atypical responses to learning that Randy had been killed.
Oh, great.
In the days following Randy's death, both Daniel and Stuart got lawyers and stopped talking directly to police. Now, a lot of people find this suspicious. We hear this over and over, right? Like, well, they lawyered up. What are they trying to hide? And I see why people say that. Also, in this scenario, this is a very wealthy family. I don't think necessarily getting a lawyer to sit with you while you talk to authorities is necessarily a bad idea. And especially for a wealthy family, I can see them wanting to protect themselves if the cost of getting an attorney wasn't a burden, etc.
The addition of the attorney does not indicate guilt, in my opinion. The weird behavior indicates guilt, in my opinion.
Sure. But a lot of people do have a problem anytime anybody gets an attorney in a situation like this.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to like polygraph stuff. If you refuse to take a polygraph test, it must mean you're hiding something. And my rational mind knows that's not really true.
Right.
But it certainly gives the feeling of guilt.
Right. What are you trying to hide? Meanwhile, Randy's mother, Heidi, and her daughter, Sari, called a news conference asking for the public's help. So they're doing anything they can to get answers, but neither Stuart nor Daniel attended the press conference.
Ooh, that doesn't bode well.
That's interesting. Investigators began looking into Randy and Stuart's personal life, including their finances, but found nothing unusual. But in August of 2007, so that same year, Daniel was arrested for trying to illegally buy prescription drugs, and he was sentenced to 3 years of drug offender probation and was required to enroll in a residential drug treatment program. According to his lawyer, Daniel suffered from a drug addiction that worsened after his mother's murder. These charges were later dropped.
Well, whether he's guilty of her murder or he just lost his mom and he's got suspicion on him. I mean, if you have a tendency to rely on substances, I can see how that would get worse.
Oh, sure. Me too. In fact, I was like, well, yeah, if you're addicted to drugs and then your mom is murdered, you're going to take more drugs. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that all seems kind of like a natural course of progression there for me. Again, the weird behavior in the beginning is the red flag to me.
It is, but let's say that he did have an addiction and was using. Could that explain some of the weird behavior?
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely could. But I don't know about the clothing. The clothing seems kind of strange to me. I don't know. We'll see.
In 2008, so the following year, Stewart was arrested because the Florida Department of Financial Services accused Stewart's practice of billing private insurance twice. These charges were also later dropped.
Oh, Stuart. Stuart.
I think they had some good attorneys. I think they were wise to lawyer up because both sets of charges were dropped. And of course, I don't know why. Maybe they never should have been brought in the first place. But either way, I would say probably good on them to have those attorneys.
Yeah, it just sounds like there's some fishy stuff going on over there.
Neither Daniel nor Stewart were ever officially suspects in Randy's death. However, neither have been ruled out. No one has ever been ruled out. And there has never been a DNA match in her case. Now, just 5 months after Randy's vicious murder, a second attack occurred. This victim is known only as Jane Doe, as her name has never been released to the public. On Tuesday, August 7th, 2007, Jane Doe and her 2-year-old son were leaving the Boca Town Center Mall. When they got to her SUV parked in the Nordstrom parking garage, so she was in the parking garage, Jane Doe stood on the passenger side of the vehicle as she strapped her little boy into the middle car seat. She then walked to the trunk to put the stroller away before walking around to get into the driver's seat of the vehicle. By the time she was in the SUV, a man had already slipped into her back seat and was sitting in the back next to her son.
Well, that's the stuff of nightmares.
Horrifying. Like every mother's fear, right? I mean, even now, my kids are older, so it's not quite as difficult. Like we're not dealing with strollers and things like that. But one of them, I still help to get into a seat. And I'm literally looking over my shoulder. I'm looking around me. I am on super high alert anytime I'm getting my kids in and out of the car.
It's a vulnerable position. Now, I do have a question about this Jane Doe. Has her name not been released to the public, or the police genuinely don't know who she is?
The police know who she is. Her name has never been released to the public.
Why would that be?
I'll tell you at the end of her story.
Okay, so there is a reason. Okay,
there is a reason.
Right. I'm interested because I don't know that I've ever heard something like that. I mean, maybe, I know, witness protection or something, but I've never heard of anything like this. But okay, go ahead.
I questioned it at first also, but at the end we'll talk about it, and there's a very good reason.
Okay.
Now, like I said, as soon as she got in her SUV, the guy was already in the back seat, which means he was following very closely behind her. He was lurking. He had been watching her, at least for a little bit, right? To know how to get in the vehicle so quickly.
It truly is like a scene from a movie.
Yes.
This is totally not related to this case, but it is in the way of things that are out of a movie. Did you hear about this recent case that happened where a teenager was babysitting a little girl who kept coming down? And this is actually in the news. I can post the article on our social media. I'm trying to remember. It was like in a Midwest state. And the little girl kept coming down saying, "There's a monster under my bed." And of course, this babysitter kept saying, "No, there's no monster under your bed. Everything's fine." Because kids always say this kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
So she kept putting her back in the bed, and the little girl finally said, "No, there's a monster under my bed." And what do? You get down and you look under the bed, right?
Oh my God, stop. I'm covered in chills, and I don't know what you're going to say next.
It happened about 6 weeks ago. There was a man under the bed.
Stephanie.
There was a man under the bed. This man charged the babysitter. They got into an altercation, and the man kind of like threw her like against the wall and then ran out of the house. It turns out this man had previously lived in the house, and he had some psychological issues, but he was also a dangerous man, and he kept trying to break back into the house. And somehow this night he had been successful and had hid under this little girl's bed, and this babysitter found him.
and truly the stuff of nightmares. And I just feel so bad for that little girl because
And the babysitter. Are you kidding me?
I mean, I feel bad for the babysitter, but that little girl had to lay there knowing there's a monster under her bed.
Yeah, a monster under the bed.
Terrifying. Thank
Imagine
goodness
being that-
nobody was hurt.
No, imagine being that baby. Oh, yes. And I think something like she had hurt her arm or something when he threw her. But can you imagine looking under the bed and seeing somebody looking back at you and then they charge you?
No, of course not, because you expect to look under the bed and see, look, there's nothing under there. Reminds me of the time I was babysitting, and it was already a creepy house. It was kind of a weird family, and it was thundering outside. And I went upstairs to check on the kids who were already asleep. And right as I got to the bedside and looked over this kid, a lightning flashed and lit up. I think it's called a My Buddy doll. It's like the doll that Chucky's modeled after.
Yeah.
So lit him up in silhouette and scared the guacamole out of me. So literally, as you're telling me the story, I see myself walking into that bedroom, because I remember that bedroom, and looking under the bed and there being a man under there. Horrific.
Mm-hmm. I remember those My Buddy dolls. There was a kid sister too. Literally the jingle. I'm like, my buddy, my buddy, kid sister. I never had one, sadly. And now maybe I'm glad that I didn't. So there we go.
I didn't have one either, but they're very much like a little Chucky doll. So we'll post a picture in our episode extras for any of you who did not grow up in the 80s.
That's comforting. There have actually been quite a few haunted doll stories that had come to my attention. So I'm thinking about putting those together in a little episode too. So maybe you can include the story again in our haunted doll episode.
Will do. Will do.
So anywho, relating back to our Jane Doe's case, it's like that. It's like that scene that you never think could really happen in real life, like finding the monster under the bed, like finding a haunted doll in the creepy house where you're babysitting, like turning around and finding a bad guy. I can't tell you how many times I've driven home at night and I'm looking in the rearview mirror waiting to see like the guy with the knife in the back or something, because your imagination goes wild. But in this case, you're turning around and he really is right there, and not just right there next to your 2-year-old.
Exactly. And Stephanie, he was pointing a gun.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, just talk about blood draining from your body.
The man pointed a gun at Jane Doe and demanded she drive to an ATM machine where he made her pull out $200. Now, Jane knew that she didn't have a lot of money in her account at the time, but she did as she was told, and she was able to withdraw the cash. The gunman then made Jane drive to 2 more ATMs and pull out an additional $200 each time. After withdrawing $600 total, her abductor ordered Jane to drive to a parking lot at a hotel where he bound and blindfolded her, and he blindfolded her with blacked out swim goggles. That's important. And then he got behind the wheel and started driving. Now, obviously, Jane was terrified. She spent the entire ordeal praying that a trooper would pull the car over, while she was also begging this gunman to not kill her or her son. Now, fortunately, the little boy slept through a lot of the ordeal, but at one point dropped his bottle and started crying. This may have worked to Jane's benefit, because the gunman was surprisingly compassionate towards the little boy and to Jane, asking if they needed water, asking if the little boy needed a bottle. At one point, the suspect seemed to accidentally drive onto Florida's Turnpike heading north. Jane thought that the man didn't seem to be very familiar with the roads, and soon after getting on the Turnpike, the vehicle exited and drove south again back to the mall.
Oh, okay.
In a parking spot near Bloomingdale's, the gunman decided he was going to let Jane and her little boy go. He zip-tied Jane to the seat, made sure she was blindfolded, and put a toy handcuff, or it's been referred to as a toy handcuff and also like a weak handcuff. So I think it was like strong enough that it would hold a bit, but it wasn't like a metal handcuff that a police officer would use. So he put this handcuff around her wrist, and he told her not to get out of the car and reminded her he had her driver's license and knew where she lived. He also told her if she called the police, she should tell them that he was a short, fat black man. And then he left her. Jane was able to get herself free. She had to slide her handcuffed hands under her feet, something she was only able to do because she had practiced yoga. She then ran to the valet stand at Saks, where the police were called. Now, Jane was able to give an artist details, and a composite sketch was released of the subject. But he had been wearing a wide-brimmed, what I would call like a fishing style, like floppy hat and sunglasses. So literally half of his face was obscured. Retired FBI agent John McVeigh, who worked on this case for 10 years and is now a private investigator, said, quote, "The problem is you have to think that the top half of the head is totally unknown, dude. The glasses and the hat. I mean, if I pulled your hair back and put a hat and glasses on you, you could be it. I could be it." End quote.
So I'm assuming he was not, in fact, a short, fat black man.
He was not. He was a white man. We will post the composite picture on our episode extras, but it just looked like anybody.
Yeah, the very unhelpful composite sketch.
Right. But we can say for sure he wasn't a short, fat black man.
Okay, well, at least we've got that, I suppose.
Right. Now, despite Jane's clear retelling of the story, police were hesitant to believe her at first. There had been a problem with the SunPass system, so when she said that the suspect had taken her on the turnpike, her SunPass, which is the automatic billing system for, these toll roads, it didn't register that she'd actually been on the turnpike. Police also wondered how Jane could have freed herself from the bindings she described being put in.
Right.
Tragically, not only was Jane Doe's story true, it was about to happen again. And here's where I'll tell you, it is my belief that she's known only as Jane Doe because this man had threatened her, threatened that if she went to the police, he would come after her. I don't know if he took the driver's license or maybe he had just seen it, but I think it was to protect her. Because one thing I will say I know for sure is that she carried fear of this man for years. She probably still is. This would be terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
This ordeal. So it's my belief that that's why her name has been kept private.
Yeah, Jane Doe is deserving of lots and lots and lots of therapy.
To say the least. 4 months later, right before midnight on December 12th, 2007, a security guard at the same town center mall noticed a black 2007 Chrysler Aspen with the engine running, parked in the lot on the south side of the Sears department store. It appeared that a woman and a little girl were inside the vehicle sleeping. Now, because this was out of the norm for what he was used to seeing, the guard called the Boca Raton police on a non-emergency line and asked for an officer to come check things out. Inside the vehicle, officers found the bodies of 47-year-old mother Nancy Boquicchio and her 7-year-old daughter, Joey Boquicchio Hauser. Both had been fatally shot, and both had been bound at the hands, feet, and necks with duct tape, plastic ties, and handcuffs. Now, one of the victims, and police have never said which one, was also wearing blacked out goggles, just like in the Jane Doe case.
Oh my gosh. Okay, all of this is horrendous. Also, the idea that a baby could have been wearing those little blacked out goggles is horrendous. I hate all of this.
I assume it was probably Nancy wearing the goggles because she would have been the bigger threat, but the police have never said, so can't say for sure. That's what my gut would tell me, but who knows? This is a monster, so who knows what their motives were for anything. But to shoot a 7-year-old?
No. And again, assuming this is the same person, when you come to victim profiles, is a 2-year-old that much more innocent than a 7-year-old? Like, to me, they're all babies.
Oh, sure. Me too. And we will talk about that a little more when we start talking about theories. But I'm with you. If you're going to have compassion for a 2-year-old, you mean you wouldn't for a 7-year-old?
Right.
Now, this tragedy, the murder of a woman and her 7-year-old daughter, began a massive investigation involving resources from all around the country. Boca Raton police crime scene technicians collected several hundred pieces of evidence from the scene, including DNA samples. Within hours of the incident, investigators were using various resources to identify a possible timeline and course of events. And here is what they pieced together. On Wednesday, December 12th, 2007, Nancy, who ran her own business as a stock analyst, picked up 7-year-old Joey from school a little early for a doctor's appointment, and then the two decided to do some Christmas shopping. Joey was going to be playing a reindeer in her school play the next evening, and Nancy wanted to give a little gift to a friend while at the play.
Oh my gosh.
I know that part, probably because we just wrapped up the end of the year school programs, and it's just like, wow, this was just a mother and her baby trying to enjoy a fun outing because get this, Joey's 8th birthday was in just 3 days.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that is truly, I mean, heartbreaking isn't even the word for it. I can't even come up with what that is, but it's so tragic and senseless.
Senseless is definitely a word that resonates with me for this particular crime. A 7-year-old? I mean, come on. Yeah, no. Ugh. This one is infuriating. The two entered the mall at approximately 2:19 p.m. They were, as I said, excited to do some Christmas shopping. They left the building through the same doors that they'd entered just under an hour later at 3:11 p.m. And that's when Boca Raton investigators believed that they were abducted and taken to an ATM where they were forced to withdraw $500. At 3:14, so just 3 minutes after being seen on the surveillance leaving the mall, Nancy's cell phone made a 911 call that went to the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. But the call was disconnected before dispatchers could answer it. The dispatcher tried to call back to Nancy's phone, but no one answered. Upon further investigation, authorities noticed that the binding on Nancy's wrist were broken, which was a clue to investigators that Nancy had fought back, and they were able to piece together that Nancy had tried to get Joey out of the car.
No.
Which, that part, I mean, literally, I'm tearing up just thinking about it because I just think, here's this mother trying to push her daughter out of the car to protect her. And we know that she was tragically unable to do so. Authorities were not able to say for sure if Nancy and Joey were shot at the town center mall where the vehicle was found or at another location. And again, because there was no parking lot cameras, they didn't know when the vehicle was returned to the mall after the trip to the ATM. Joanne Bruno, Nancy's sister, had actually been on the phone with Nancy when she got out to go inside the mall, and she was confused when Nancy never showed up for dinner as they had previously planned. Joanne and her kids called Nancy all night, trying to figure out where she was, until finally learning what had happened to her. 1 week after their murder, on December 14th, 2007, a $400,000 reward was offered by the city of Boca Raton together with the FBI. This is a huge reward.
Yeah, get it, Boca Raton.
Right. Dozens of investigators worked towards canvassing various locations, scrutinizing hours of surveillance video, processing and evaluating evidence, and following up on leads. And as the initial leads were being investigated, 2 people of interest were identified. Now, these 2 people I'm going to tell you about were men who I've seen reported as having no homes that just hung out in this one area. On Tuesday, December 18th, authorities released a photograph of a man named David Goodman and a sketch of a second man who authorities referred to only as Charles. David Goodman was of interest to police because he was believed to have found Nancy's credit card. Within hours of releasing his information, David was located by Boca Raton police investigators at a Burger King in Miami. He was immediately taken in for questioning, and shortly after the interview, David Goodman was arrested by the Miami Police Department on an unrelated Broward County warrant. I believe it was for a vehicle theft, I believe is what he was arrested for. Charles was later identified as Charles Jackson. Investigators believe that he had access to Nancy's cell phone at some point after she and Joey had been murdered. The day after his information was released, Charles Jackson was located by Boca Raton police investigators, also in Miami, and interviewed. During his questioning, Charles said that he'd found Nancy's cell phone in the area of 1500 Northeast 1st Avenue, Miami. Charles was very cooperative and provided any information that he could to help further the investigation.
So these two men came out as persons of interest because they found personal items of Nancy's and reported them?
Yes. So what it appears to me that whoever killed Nancy and Joey made their way to Miami because Nancy's credit card and cell phone were found in an area of Miami. So that's what I put together. Police have never said either way. They just came out and said, hey, we have these two persons of interest, who we believe were using some of Nancy's things after she was killed.
And then these unhoused individuals found these things, gave them to police, and then some police invited them in for questioning.
I don't think the two men went willingly to the police. The police were looking for them. Here's what I don't know. I don't know how the police knew that David and Charles had come upon these things. I don't know if maybe they tried using them. That part, I don't know. I assume David maybe tried using her credit card.
Okay.
I assume Charles tried using her cell phone, and they were able to follow leads to figure out who had possession of these things because it was the police who put their names out looking for these men.
Okay, got it.
But I haven't read anything that said for sure how it happened. That's just what makes sense to me. Boca Raton detectives and officers from other agencies thoroughly searched and canvassed the area where Charles said he found the phone. They conducted interviews in the area as well as passing out flyers. They reviewed surveillance video and followed up on all potential leads, but not much came from their efforts. It wasn't until Nancy and Joey's murder that authorities really believed Jane Doe's account. And suddenly, it became clear that there was at least one monster on the loose in Boca. FBI agents canvassed the mall, issuing subpoenas and going door to door. And this may not sound like a big project, but there's approximately 14,000 people who work at or with the mall, vendors, employees of that nature. So just checking out the people at the mall alone was a huge job. About a month and a half after Nancy and Joey's murders, a task force consisting of officers from both Boca Raton and Palm Beach County was formed to investigate whether the attacks were related. And in 2009, they took an even more proactive approach to the case on the request from the state attorney's office, meaning they pretty much started over from scratch on all three cases. But ultimately, they found nothing to leak the three crimes, and the task force disbanded. However, retired FBI agent John McVeigh, who worked on these cases for 10 years, firmly believes that all three attacks are related after seeing several similarities. First, he said, quote, "The suspect was trying to control women," end quote. In both the Jane Doe and Boquiquio cases, the suspect used that pair of blacked out swim goggles, as well as other strange materials to bind and control the victims. That's a big similarity, if you ask me.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
He also noticed that all three crimes took place in broad daylight and right around the same time of day. He said it wasn't a small coincidence. He said there's not one or two small things, it's an accumulation of things, referring to the related details among the cases. McVeigh also believes that the crimes were a progression. So you asked, what was the difference between a 2-year-old child and a 7-year-old child? Why would you allow a 2-year-old child to go free and not a 7-year-old? If it's a progression, that may explain that. The first murder was of a single woman, Randy. But Randy was a tough woman, and her family says there is no doubt that she would have fought back, and she would have fought back hard. So McVeigh thinks that moving on to a woman with a small child could give the killer more control because they could threaten the child to control the mother.
Sure. And it worked.
Exactly. He thinks if the motive were just robbery, then the perpetrator would have just taken the money and gone. There would have been no need to go through the trouble of tying them up, driving them around, torturing them, really, the way that we know he did.
I mean, it's a slow burn robbery, right? Because he continued to extract money from them.
Yes, there was definitely a robbery component. In the case of Jane, he took her to 3 different ATMs. But from what I've read, definitely McVeigh, but from what I've read, several other investigators on the case don't think that was the ultimate motive. They think it was more about just controlling them. And I can see even making them drive around and going to different ATMs just being really almost a form of torture. Like, why not just get all the money from one ATM? Like, I'm just going to make you drive around.
Oh, I think mine was maybe they had limits of how much you could take out from the ATM. That's what I was thinking. That's why he was making them go to multiple ATMs to get additional money out at each ATM. Maybe that's an incorrect assumption.
No, that could be absolutely, that could be the case. I always assumed that the limit was like a daily limit, not necessarily a machine limit, but I don't know. I don't know enough about how those daily limits work to know for sure.
I don't know. Was the end goal the money, or was that almost just like a souvenir, like a trophy from having dominated these women with their children? Which, how cowardly do you have to be?
Right. Well, and I think that's what authorities believe. They don't believe the money was the motive.
Yeah.
It happened, but they definitely don't think the money was the motive. And maybe the amounts was part of the reason.
I could see that. I could see that tracking.
Regarding similarities, there was also no evidence of sexual assault on any of the victims. I think that's a pretty big similarity.
Well, that's a small concession, but that's a good thing.
However, there was one glaring difference. If you remember, Randy was not bound like the other victims were.
Right, and no evidence of the goggles.
Now, I personally believe that that could be because she was the first. So maybe the killer didn't know what to expect. And if Randy really did put up a big fight, like we believe she probably did, that could have told the killer, okay, on subsequent attacks, I need to incapacitate these women.
Yeah, in my mind, as soon as you said it, I thought, okay, escalation. That's
Right.
what I chalked it up to. But you're right. It could mean her case is possibly unrelated to these other two cases.
It could be, but there's one other similarity that I only saw in one place, and I'm not a car person, and I think there was one make of vehicle that I didn't get the name of it, but I have heard it said that all three, we know for sure at least two, but I've heard it said that all three vehicles were black SUVs, which is interesting.
Huh. Okay. Random. I mean, or maybe not. Maybe that's the whole point. Not random.
I wonder if, because I believe it was Jane Doe's vehicle was described as having like darker windows. So I wonder if maybe all three had darker windows, and that just kind of was maybe more standard with like a darker vehicle. And so maybe he chose vehicles that he thought he would be less likely to be spotted in. Or maybe he had a thing for black SUVs. I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible. But in the Bokikio case, clearly they weren't like blackout windows or anything because they were seen by a passerby,
Sure.
laying in the car. So,
well, they were seen by a security guard, a mall security guard. It was almost midnight. The car was running, which was unusual. I don't know if he shined a flashlight in.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't
Okay,
just a
that makes
random
sense.
passerby. It was a security officer.
Okay, then. You know what? Maybe I take back that statement. It was someone who was making a concerted effort to look into the vehicle and was able to see them. So, yeah, maybe I retract my other statement then, but still interesting.
America's Most Wanted profiled the cases 3 times on their program in just a matter of a few months, even commissioning forensic artist John McMahon to enhance Jane Doe's original sketch. And after working with John, Jane Doe said, yes, this is much more accurate as to what this man looked like.
Yes, this hat looks much more fashionable, and these glasses are much more name brand.
Right.
I mean, how do you expand on a half-covered face? But I'm glad she felt it was a better representation.
Now, I'm sad to tell you that there's really no person of interest in any of these cases. Now, just last year, a new documentary series called Under the Radar suggested that Peter Mangs, a Swedish serial killer known for his racially motivated crimes in Europe, was behind the Jane Doe kidnapping. While he's currently serving a life sentence in Sweden for a killing spree, the series claims he was visiting his family in 2007, and he does have ties to Boca. In fact, his father still lives there. However, authorities have determined that Mangs was not in the country at the time. However, there are still some that claim Mangs is the guy and that he was using multiple passports, causing investigators to be mistaken about the dates. From prison, Mangs has been writing letters to a Swedish producer and writing music full of clues and codes about other unsolved cases in Florida.
Oh, so he's one of those shifty ones, isn't he?
Real helpful, I'd say. Helpful, I think, Stephanie, is the word you're looking for.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not being at all sarcastic.
Not shady or weird at
No.
all. He knows nothing.
That's right. Now, there are intriguing scraps of information and even photos of Mings at the mall, but there's no solid evidence that he was the gunman who held up Jane Doe. Now, remember, DNA was collected in both Randy's case and in Nancy and Joey's, and we have come a long way in the DNA world from where we were even 18 years ago when the crimes were committed. The problem in this case might be the fact that at least some of the DNA they have is a mixture. So presumably a mixture of more than one person, and that can make identifying any one person much, much more difficult. However, as technology changes and evolves regarding DNA testing, this case is continuously being reevaluated, according to a Boca Raton Police Department spokesperson. They go on to say, "We remain optimistic that technological advances will lead our investigators to a breakthrough in the investigation." Retired Boca Raton Police Captain Matt Duggan kept a photo of Nancy and Joey at his desk. He said, "I'd like to think I had a good career. I'd like to think we put some bad guys away and worked some big cases, but it's not fulfilled, not complete." The estates of Nancy and Joey Boquicchio and Randy Gorenberg sued Simon Property Group, the owner of the town center at Boca Raton, for wrongful death. Both lawsuits were filed in Palm Beach County with similar allegations. The families, on behalf of their deceased loved ones, claimed Simon Property Group had a duty to protect visitors to the mall by providing adequate security services to address, quote, "the ongoing nature of the criminal activity at the premises," end quote, as the Gorenberg lawsuit worded it. Both lawsuits argued the deaths were foreseeable and preventable. Jane Doe also filed a lawsuit against Simon Property Group in Broward County alleging negligence. Like the other two lawsuits, Jane Doe claimed the mall owner should have been aware of any foreseeable danger on the premises and taken steps to protect them. Jane Doe's complaint pointed to lasting physical and psychological injuries because of the kidnapping, stating, quote, "The injuries suffered by the plaintiff are continuing in nature. She will continue in the future to suffer disease, pain, loss of earning, physical handicap, impairment, permanent injury, and will be further compelled to expend great sums for medical care and related treatment for those injuries," end quote. Simon Property Group denied wrongdoing in all three cases and filed cross-claims against the third-party company used to provide security services at Simon malls. The cross-claims argued that if anyone were to be held liable, it should be the security company. The security company argued in court documents that its contract with Simon protects it from liability. All three lawsuits ended with confidential settlements. And that's it, Stephanie. 18 years after the string of attacks, we still can't say for sure whether they were related, whether there was one killer, multiple killers. We don't know anything for sure.
I want to know what those confidential settlements were.
I know, me too, right?
I would really be interested to see if a court eventually gave a ruling, what percentage of responsibility they would assign to each of those parties. I think that would just be interesting to know. Now, it doesn't sound like they ever got to that point. It sounds like they figured out something outside of court. But, I mean, the security company can't be everywhere. Mall security is basically just there to help you restart your car if your battery dies.
Right.
Like, that's kind of what they do. I mean, I don't think they carry weapons or anything. If there really was a bad guy, what are they going to do?
I will say, and I don't know what the changes are, but I did read in an article that the mall has made some changes to their security. One change I am aware of, they now use a different security company to protect the mall.
It's
Like
just
you said, security guards, I don't think they carry weapons. There's probably cameras now, maybe better lighting, but I don't know that any of that would have made a difference. First of all, it was in the middle of the day. It was in the middle of the day. It's like 2:00
Well,
in the
this is what
afternoon,
I'm
3:00 in
saying.
the
I don't know
afternoon.
that anybody could have anticipated that. I don't
Right.
know that the mall owner could have anticipated that. I don't know that the security guard could have anticipated that. They're, again, there to help people that are having car trouble. And I do think they help with just general theft. I notice malls that have security, you have fewer car break-ins and things like that. But they're not there to apprehend possible serial killers.
Right. Yeah. If there had been cameras, we may have been able to catch the guy. And so maybe for subsequent cases, maybe that would be the argument. Well, if you had cameras, we would have seen it. But I don't think anything would have saved Randy.
I don't know that you could say Simon Mall or the security company could have predicted Randy's murder.
Right? It was
I don't know that they could have foreseen that. Now, you could certainly argue Jane Doe's kidnapping and Nancy and Joey's murder. They could have been on higher alert based on what had happened to Randy. But at that point, there were two pretty viable suspects in her case that could have indicated it was a personal matter that had nothing to do with the mall.
Sadly, there are bad people in this world, and sometimes good people run into them. And I think that's what happened with all three of these cases.
Yeah. I do think there are enough similarities to say the Jane Doe case and the Bokikio case are related.
I think all three are, because to me, the differences in Randy's case can be explained away by the fact that she was the first. I think there's more similarities than there are differences for me.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, after the Bokikio case, it all just ended? Nothing else happened?
There were some other attacks, some carjackings, some robberies in other areas in South Florida that were investigated and looked into to see if maybe they were related, and they've all been ruled out as having been related. So as far as cases that happened at the mall, these are the three cases, and I don't know of any other crimes that have been linked.
So the suspect either moved on to a different location or was apprehended for other charges or is deceased.
Yep.
I mean, I think those are the only options, right?
Yeah. And they may have done this. They probably did look at other attacks like around malls just across the country. But to my knowledge, there's never been any smoking gun that's been like, this is our guy.
Wow. What a wild case. And so scary, because I could be any of these women. I am these women. I am these women at the mall in broad daylight with my kid, having a great afternoon. I am these women.
Right. And again, Boca is not a dangerous community.
Right.
There are malls here, even in Central Florida, where they have a reputation of being in more dangerous neighborhoods, more dangerous areas that I'm not going to go to. I'm not going to take my kid to. Boca Raton is not that place.
Yeah.
It's not. So that doesn't mean bad people can't be everywhere. We know they are, but it's not an area you would generally be on high alert. But I guess we have to be on high alert all the time, don't we? Which is awful.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that we have to live like that, but we do.
Yeah. Okay, Cynthia. Wow. Very interesting case. Very thought-provoking. Well, do you want to bring us Branch of Hope today?
Absolutely. Again, today in our episode, we've talked about these amazing, strong women and girls. And as most of our listeners know, I just lost my beautiful mother, Renee, to ovarian cancer just a couple of months ago. And so our June 2025 Branch of Hope recipient is the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance in honor of my mother. Ovarian cancer is the 8th most common cancer in women worldwide and one of the leading causes of cancer death in women. Approximately 140,000 women die from the disease each year. That's a lot. That's a lot of our mothers and daughters and sisters. That's 140,000 too many. Part of what makes ovarian cancer so deadly is that the majority of women are diagnosed in late stages because this disease is pretty asymptomatic. My mom had no symptoms until she suddenly gained 8 pounds in 5 days. She went to the doctor. She had late stage ovarian cancer. She'd had it for some time and we had no idea because she had no symptoms. The Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance, or OCRA, is the world's largest organization dedicated to fighting ovarian and all gynecologic cancers. They've invested $128 million into related cancer research, making it the largest global funder of research by far in the fight against this cancer. An OCRA research team is currently using artificial intelligence to develop a blood test to potentially detect ovarian cancer. This would be amazing because, like I mentioned, it's very hard to detect, but early diagnosis of ovarian cancer is crucial for improved survival rates. I said it last week and I'm going to say it again. If you or someone you love has ovaries, this affects you. So in honor of my mother, Renee, and everyone who has fought this terrible disease, let's join forces and let's beat this thing. If you would like to give to OCRA directly, you can find their information in our show notes. And if you're a member of our Patreon, you can feel good because a portion of your membership will go directly to this charity.
I love it. I love it. What a sweet tribute to your mama. I think it's amazing. And we're going to help so many women. I love it.
Yes, me too. I feel really good about it.
Okay, Shiver Seekers. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for supporting us women's. Be sure to join us next week when we bring you more thrills and chills.
All right, I'm going to go see how many more lizards have been brought into my house. Bye.
Bye. This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.